Okay, thank you. Okay, can I welcome you to the Scrutiny Board, Environment, Housing and Communities, 15th of October. Hopefully you find this morning's agenda something that you can find to your liking. What we are doing this meeting remotely, can I ask that all members, if at all possible, keep themselves muted at all times unless they're being invited to speak, and if they can keep their videos on, that would also be helpful. The only other thing is, if you do want to speak, if you just use the hands symbol, the raise hand button at the bottom of the screen, I'll then be able to pick up. But I will ask at various times if anybody wants to speak, if that's not working for any reason at all. Now, in terms of the technicalities, if I cannot establish a connection, we need to appoint a deputy chair. And in the past, we've had Councillor Graham chairing it if I cannot get back in again. And then if Councillor Graham was to fall out for any reason at all, Councillor Gruen would then take over. So I don't see anybody dissenting from that, so that's what we're going to do. So what I'm going to do, first of all, is get everybody to introduce themselves. Now, just at this stage, the councillors, I will then get the participants and the officers to introduce themselves as and when. So if we can go through, I'll do it in alphabetical order. Councillor Akhtar. He is there. Councillor Akhtar?
Yeah, Javed Akhtar, London and Woodhouse.
Thank you. Is Councillor Bentley in? Not yet. Councillor Blackburn?
Good morning, Councillor Blackburn, Family and Wortley Ward.
Councillor Brooks?
Good morning, Councillor Kayleigh Brooks, Little London and Woodhouse Ward.
Councillor Collins?
Good morning, Councillor Dawn Collins from Horsforth Ward.
Councillor Dobson will be coming in later on. There's some technical issues at the moment, so we're resolving that one. Councillor Gabriel?
Angela Gabriel, Beeston and Holbeck Ward.
Councillor Graham?
Morning, Councillor Pauline Graham, Crossgates and Winmore Ward.
Councillor Gruen?
Good morning, Councillor Peter Gruen.
Councillor Harland?
Good morning, Mary Harland, Councillor for Kipperton Methley Ward.
Councillor Khan?
Good morning, Councillor Asghar Khan, Councillor for Burmatoffs and Richmond Hill Ward.
And Councillor Smith?
Good morning, Councillor Trish Smith. I represent Pudgy Ward.
Okay. Right. So that it will now move to items 1 to 5. Natasha Prosser, can you just run through those for us, please?
Thank you, Chair. So under agenda item number 1, there are no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Under agenda item number 2, there are no items that require the exclusion of the press or public. Under agenda item 3, there are no formal late items. Under agenda item number 4, please can I ask members to declare any pecuniary interests? I'll take that as none. Under agenda item number 5, I've received apologies for absence from Councillor Sharp. Additional apologies have also been received from Councillor Feek and Victoria Bradshaw.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of the minutes, item 6, everybody happy with those minutes? If anybody wants to shout out if they're not happy, so we'll assume that that is all correct. So as because of the ongoing situation with coronavirus, a gold meeting has been called just now, which means that James Rogers and Neil Evans cannot currently make the meeting at this point. They would hope to be able to come in round about 11 o'clock. So as a result of that, I'm bringing forward item 8, which is nitrous oxide misuse, further up the agenda. So as far as that particular item is concerned, can I ask, first of all, Councillor Robinson, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Matthew Robinson from the Harewood Ward. I originally brought the request in for scrutiny on this item.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Morning, everybody. Councillor Deborah Cooper, Exec Board Member for Communities.
Mr. Money.
Good morning, everybody. Paul Money, Chief Officer for Safer Leeds, the Community Safety Partnership in the city.
And Harinder.
Yes, Harvey Samby, Head of Operational Delivery, Safer Leeds.
Okay, right. What we're going to do is we've got the report in front of us, but I'm going to invite Harvey and Mr. Money to outline the important points they want to bring to the attention of the board. I will then invite Councillor Robinson to say anything he would like to add to what's already been said. And I will then put it open to questions. And then at the very end of the session, we will determine whether or not we want to do any further investigation or put it into, say, 12 months' time, come back again to look at it again. Okay, so I'll hand over to Mr. Money and Harvey.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Firstly, if I can say that I'm grateful to the support that we've received from our colleagues in public health, the Safer Leeds Antisocial Behaviour team, our colleagues in training standards, and West Yorkshire Police in terms of the detail that I'm now going to take the opportunity to talk you through. So hopefully you've got a copy of the relevant report as part of your scrutiny board pack. So I'll just go through some key highlights if I may. I'll start at 2.1, which details the fact that we have received a number of complaints, and those complaints around the use of nitrous oxide in the city have increased. Although it looks like we may be tracking some seasonal trends in terms of complaints around nitrous oxide. So the peak that we saw in the summer months is starting now to dissipate slightly. We'll come on to more detail around that further in the report. The other issue in terms of usage is that it has been quite difficult to determine whether we've got that increased use, say this year compared to last year, or whether what we've got is an issue that's taking place in a more visible setting due to the current coronavirus temporary closures of venues and events where we know from our intelligence we see this kind of usage taking place. Okay. In terms of 2.3, just talks there about nitrous oxide and the impact that this has on an individual, particularly an individual who chooses to inhale this particular gas. It slows down the brain and the body's responses, and the effects of the gas, depending to some degree on how much has been inhaled, can cause feelings of euphoria, relaxation, calmness, laughter, as well as sound distortion, and in some instances we've reports of hallucinations. Although nitrous oxide is not physically addictive, our colleagues in public health do advise that it is possible to become at least psychologically dependent upon nitrous oxide, meaning in some instances that those who use it can develop an increased use, but unlike a number of other substances, not addictive in that sense. In terms of the legislation, there are various pieces of legislation relevant to nitrous oxide. 3.2 details the criminal offences, and as you can see there, it's an offence to produce psychoactive substances. It's an offence to possess a psychoactive substance, but only with intent to supply. It's an offence to supply, an offer to supply, and there are other offences in terms of the importation and aggravated offences where essentially what's taking place is involving children. In terms of the current trends in Leeds at section 4, the most common trend we see are reports of groups of tends to be younger people. It does tend to be males, but not wholly exclusively, in vehicles parked up in various different locations, inhaling the canisters from balloons, which is typically how the substance is inhaled. We have had issues in house parties, and also I call them unofficial raves. I think members will understand what I mean there, but unauthorised gatherings that we've seen through the summer months. The current intelligence around the use of nitrous oxide essentially is coming to us in a number of different forms. West Yorkshire Police do not currently record the use and incidents they deal with around psychoactive substances in a standard manner. They have a number of ways of categorising their incidents, but we are able to distill from their calls for service the number of incidents and the types of incidents we're dealing with. And the number of incidents tends to be higher in inner city wards. And again, it's more to do with those vehicles parked up, those car meets, those vehicles parked up that colleagues have seen in their particular wards. In terms of the volumes, you can hopefully see at 5.4 what I think I was starting to allude to in terms of maybe a seasonal trend issue that's been picked up, certainly in terms of recorded and reported incidents. You can see that the numbers are beginning to come back down again from the peak there in, I think the peak for us was May and June. But that's maybe of interest to members. There's also some analysis there of the NPT areas. Colleagues will be familiar with this, but for those that are not, those are the neighbourhood policing team areas. And city refers to the city centre in terms of a geography. In terms of what we're doing about tackling the use of nitrous oxide, with regards to enforcement, at least, we have at our disposal, as I've already said, criminal and civil legal remedies to control the use of nitrous oxide, and they're available to us and to other authorities. The police have powers to address the unlawful supply and production of nitrous oxide, and local authorities typically can use the raft of antisocial behaviour legislation that I know most people recognise to address the issue, including, if necessary, the use of PSPOs and other court orders. The use of these powers, civil and legal, complement ongoing national and local harm reduction work led by public health colleagues, particularly in the media, but focusing on youth in particular, or young people in particular. And the ambition there is to educate young people about the dangers of such use. Unlike the misuse of controlled drugs, as defined most typically in the Misuse of Drugs Act 1971, there is little evidence that we're picking up nationally and internationally that the use of nitrous oxide is linked to other crime types in the way that maybe some other Class A drugs that colleagues will be familiar with certainly does. Our colleagues in trading standards are not currently aware, in Leeds at least, of any Leeds-based businesses retailing nitrous oxide capsules to members of the public for use in an inappropriate way. The main supply route seems to be through networks of individuals, face-to-face, and using internet-based suppliers with a particular link around Facebook and Amazon. Of course, the capsules, the nitrous oxide capsules, are legally available for use in business. We do also see, over and above the public health issue, we do also see a significant issue in terms of littering in our communities, and our street cleansing teams are reporting the collection, if you will, of discarded canisters from estates, parks and streets, and we use that in terms of intelligence to inform where, for instance, we might look to direct our neighbourhood policing team patrol colleagues to operate. The preventative information discouraging the use of such substances is also extended through work that we do, particularly with parents and children, and most recently in school and educational settings. And again, it's about just raising awareness. As many colleagues will be aware, we do benefit from a fairly significant safer schools police officer footprint in our educational establishments and in our colleges and universities, and this is very much a topic that is progressed in those settings with young people. The Leeds Drug and Alcohol Social Marketing Groups, which is a collaboration between us in the Leeds City Council and our colleagues in Forward Leeds, who deliver substance misuse treatment, are currently running a harm reduction campaign on general recreational drug and alcohol use. And due to the current situation that we're in terms of social distancing, that campaign is being undertaken predominantly online. If I can just move to maybe some key issues around conclusions now. So I appreciate there's a jump there, but hopefully colleagues have had the opportunity to read the kind of sections in between. If I can take you to section 14 in the report and just try to distill out some key themes from the work that we've done. As I've said already, nitrous oxide is considered generally to be a less harmful substance than many other controlled drugs that we in community safety and our colleagues in West Yorkshire Police are particularly prioritising. The term hippie crack is a term often used to describe nitrous oxide. I think it is important to say, though, that nitrous oxide is not known to have any significant short, medium or long-term adverse effects, certainly in terms of the engagement they've done with our public health colleagues, and there doesn't appear to be any evidence of any significance about people being at significant risk of becoming dependent upon it due to that non-addictive status. It could be argued by many that the current legal status of nitrous oxide and its ease of purchase may in some respects be quite important factors with regards to contributing to any recent perceived increase in its use. Obviously members can form their own view on that. And I think it is likely that the visible use in public spaces is likely to be exacerbated as a consequence of some of the issues that we've touched on there with regards to the pandemic and the impact that that has had. The government advisory body, as you can see at 14.3, appears, at least so far, to assess the harmfulness of nitrous oxide as not warranting control under the Misuse of Drugs Act that I've already referred to. They seem to be directing, certainly up to the present time, a preference around public safety advice as a key component part of what it considers the proportionate appropriate harm reduction strategy, rather than enhancing coercive control measures through the police and local authority over and above what we've already got. And so with this in mind, it does seem to me at least that there appear to be options that we can potentially explore taking this piece of work forward, but in particular a review of the legislation, which could be argued is warranted, and opportunities to work with government, industry, retailers to better understand and maybe give us a better opportunity to disrupt the supply chains at source as a part of an overarching problem-solving approach. I'll just conclude, Councillor Anderson, if I may, by saying that I obviously do recognise that this is a significant issue for local communities and members, and we are tackling this issue and the issues as they arise, predominantly using our local ward-based partnership footprint, using the legislation, both criminal and civil, as appropriate in the circumstances. And I think our ambition will be to ensure we have an equitable balance around doing work that's intelligence-led to prevent such activity taking place in communities and with certain groups, and also enforcing where it's appropriate to do so using that legislation. I'll conclude by saying that the articulation of the situation that I've just taken you through is one that is shared by our colleagues in West Yorkshire Police. And I'll pause there for questions, Councillor Anderson, if that's the appropriate thing to do at this point.
Fine, thank you. Before I invite Councillor Robinson to come in, Councillor Bentley, for the sake of completeness, can you introduce yourself so that the public are aware who you are?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Jonathan Bentley, Councillor for Wheatwood, and my apologies for my late arrival. I normally blame the traffic, but I can't on this occasion. But I do apologise for being late to my desk.
And the other guest that we have that I didn't introduce, who's joined us, is Claire Smith. Claire, do you want to introduce who you are and your role? Having difficulty. Well, we'll come back. If we need to bring Claire in, we'll get her to introduce herself. So, Matthew, do you want to give us your reaction to what's been said as you were the originator of the request?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and I share with Paul the welcome input from all the different agencies involved, including Trading Standards, and it's really excellent to see them all working together and coming together to report back on this and recognising that there is an issue here, and that it's a multi-agency approach that's required to tackle this going forward. Some thoughts on what's in the report. Paul mentioned there about there not being a record of Leeds businesses who have been involved in selling this illegitimately, we might say. If there's anything from Trading Standards about non-Leeds businesses, because we know that crime in West Yorkshire doesn't obey local authority boundaries. Just because something is sold in Bradford or Wakefield means it can turn up in Leeds and vice versa. So I'd be interested in that. It was mentioned about information sharing between the cleansing and Safer Leeds team, and again, I'm assuming there is a commitment to ongoing reporting of this, and perhaps it comes back to the executive board in a year's time so we can see what the trends look like. Another area of concern, and again, I appreciate this might not be Paul, it might have to go to our public health colleagues, is around support for parents. So how parents can identify if their child is engaged in this and what might be involved, or if they're seeing issues around school. There's a lot that's been talked about school-led support, but what's coming for parents as well. Finally, I would just recognise that it was commented at the last scrutiny board that I attended, where I raised this issue, that there are other more serious drug offences, and I just want to put on record that my report around nitrous oxide isn't to denigrate the work that's been done around those other offences. We know that drugs offences went up between April 2019 and March 2020. That there is, in West Yorkshire, there is an issue to be dealt with here, and I think it's about a multi-agency approach and bringing lots of people together. But nitrous oxide is clearly not just an issue from the statistics that's affecting outer areas, it's affecting the whole city. And I'll pause there, Chair, because I'm sure there may be questions and an opportunity to come in later.
So just again, just coming back, when I invited Claire to introduce herself, she's actually got a problem with her mic, but Claire Smith is the Antisocial Behaviour Service Delivery Manager for Safer Leeds. So opening that up to questions from members. Any member want to ask any questions or raise any issues? Looking around, yes, Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Chair. And I came in just at the sort of conclusion of Mr. Money's report, but I have read the report. But I just came into the conclusion of Paul's presentation, so it may have been covered already. But there's a question and a comment really.
We seem to have an issue with Councillor Bentley's connection. Can someone just check it's out okay? And I'll pass over to Councillor Smith in the meantime.
Thank you, Chair. So mine is just a couple of questions, really, if I may. Firstly, in your report, Paul, you said that trading standards weren't aware of anywhere in the city that were actually selling the canisters inappropriately, shall we say. We've got 2 petrol stations in the ward that we've reported on a number of occasions to West Yorkshire Police, so they certainly should be aware of at least those outlets. And the other thing is, I've had quite an in-depth conversation with a former / reformed drug addict, and they've said that whilst taking these canisters isn't seen as harmful in themselves, they are seen as an entry-level drug to, you know, the more dangerous substances. So really, I just wanted to and say that and get your views on that, please. Thank you.
Who's Paul or Harvey? Who's going? Paul.
Sorry, I can come in there. I'm sorry I couldn't hear Councillor Bentley's earlier question.
Okay, I'll invite Councillor Bentley to come back in again in a minute.
Okay, yeah. What I'll just do is I'll maybe just pick up on Councillor Smith's point and also Councillor Robinson's just to clarify a couple of issues, if I may. Firstly, in terms of the trading standards work, we've not been able to identify with our colleagues in trading standards any businesses that are undertaking this type of unlawful activity impacting on us in Leeds. But I'll come back to that more specifically in terms of Councillor Smith's point in a second. I would say that there will continue to be an absolute commitment in terms of local partnership working, particularly with our colleagues in street cleansing, around ensuring that the intelligence flow between partners continues to improve. Because whilst there is effective working, clearly we need to keep focused on that and not be complacent. I think members can maybe play a role in that in terms of that local partnership infrastructure to continually help reinforce that messaging that there should be join up between enforcement services and our colleagues in street cleansing. I'll certainly do my bit on that. I think the point around parents is a good one that Councillor Robinson makes. And I think there would be and is more information available through our public health colleagues about how we are permeating that group more broadly along the lines of the work that we're doing in educational settings. So I can certainly provide some more information on that front. With regards to Councillor Smith's point, which is really interesting, I'd be very interested in the details, obviously, of the locations offline, because if we have got some local community intelligence about premises that are linked to this type of activity, then that local partnership structure is there and can certainly take that piece of work forward for us. So very happy to pick up offline with Councillor Smith on that particular issue. And again, I think the observation that the use of psychoactive substances and nitrous oxide may be a link to maybe a pathway, if you will, to the use of more significant drugs is not something that I'd certainly dispute, particularly with regards to where that information has come from. Somebody with that experience, I think that again is a conversation that we need to take forward with our colleagues in public health, in particular around the awareness raising and ensuring that everybody's aware of the obvious dangers that are associated with the use of nitrous oxide in this way.
Okay, right. Councillor Bentley, do you want to come in again?
Can you hear me now, Chair?
Yes, clearly.
Yeah, okay, I think there's a fault on my microphone and headset. Okay, as I said earlier, I read the report and just came in at the end. I hear the expression a number of times about harm, and I'm still trying to find out what harm taking nitrous oxide actually does to the person, to the individual. We said it doesn't lead to addiction.
is it any more harmful than having a can of beer or even a cigarette? I'm sure it's not as harmful as having a cigarette, but these are things which young people do. And would we even be aware of the problem if it wasn't for the rubbish that's left, the little canisters that are left? So people see those, and I'm failing to see how this is a big issue other than having to clear up some mess, which we do, which is an environmental issue. It's the same as youngsters gathering in green spaces or on parks and having some alcohol or smoking a crafty cigarette, as youngsters will do. And I don't want to downplay what Councillor Robertson is identifying. But if I'm missing a trick on it, please tell me. But apart from the mess that is left, which say young people do, is there any evidence that it's actually causing anybody any harm?
Paul?
A couple of thoughts on that. Certainly with regards to a comparison, as Councillor Bentley just made there, with maybe alcohol and tobacco. I don't speak as a public health expert, but I'm pretty confident in telling you that they would say that those two issues, alcohol and tobacco, are significantly more harmful to people who choose to consume them in whatever way than nitrous oxide ever is. So that's the first point in terms of harm. I think in terms of the use, though, certainly from a community safety point of view, over and above the issue about the harm to individuals, I am conscious of the impact of the use of nitrous oxide in communities. Both from an antisocial behaviour perspective, because often it is associated with antisocial behaviour. And secondly, in terms of the perception that this causes for local people in their areas. So I think in terms of the context, what I would want to reassure colleagues about is we do take this issue seriously. I suppose what I'm saying is that I feel like in terms of the local partnership arrangements that we've got in place, bolted in across the city, that we have the capacity to deal with this issue in a proportionate way with the resource that we've got and the legislation that I've alluded to. The littering, is a significant issue on occasions, particularly where you have large gatherings and the unlawful rave type activity, and it does come at significant public expense clearing this lot up. So I hope that's kind of covered in as broad a way as possible the points made by Councillor Bentley around the significance or otherwise of the issue.
Do you want to come back in again, Councillor Bentley, or are you happy?
Yeah, can I just come back? I think perhaps some of that reinforces my point, really. The gatherings and the litter and the antisocial behaviour is not a consequence of people taking nitrous oxide. It's associated with it, but it could just be associated with gatherings and people having alcohol or anything else. So it's not sort of it's not a causation. The taking nitrous oxide doesn't cause that, and I'm just a bit concerned. I'm glad Paul said I'm a bit concerned that we don't want to be criminalising young people for an activity which really is just passing and doesn't really do a great deal of harm that wouldn't be caused otherwise. I just feel that we are perhaps making too much of it. There's lots of other things that I think we could be concentrating our time on, both as a scrutiny board and as a city.
Okay, Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Bentley. So as far as I'm aware, there's been no deaths from use of nitrous oxide, but perhaps I could be wrong about Paul.
But just slightly intermittent there, but I think you were saying, Councillor Brooks, there's been no deaths. That is my understanding. There's been no direct fatalities caused through the use of nitrous oxide directly.
Thank you, Paul. And in terms of the impact, as Councillor Bentley was saying, like the impact does seem mostly to be like leaving the canisters behind after use, and the associated sort of raves, of which, you know, there has been some issues with that in my ward. But on the whole, in terms of the sort of longer term impacts of communities that drug addiction causes, for example, burglaries, street begging, things like that. Are you aware of any users that engage in that kind of behaviour?
No, we don't really see that kind of link in the same way as we do with the other substances that I know Councillor Robinson has made reference to and recognises. So no, it's quite different from individuals perhaps using heroin, spice, cannabis, crack cocaine, that type of thing.
Okay. I'm bringing in Councillor Graham, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Paul, for that report. I think it's very welcome and it gives information to be aware of. I think, Councillor Bentley, I can understand where you're coming from, but aren't we best to look at it now and stop this before it gets out of hand? And touch wood, in mine and Councillor Grewin's ward, we don't have a big issue with it. We have had some space where the canisters are left, and that is the issue. Children pick these canisters up if they're left in the park, and also animals. And then we have to bring in the environment teams to clean up. And it's all the other things that leads on from it. So I think it's something we do need to stop and look at now. So Paul, please continue with your work.
Thank you. Right, now what I want to do before bringing this to conclusion, Councillor Cooper, from your perspective, what are you intending doing now, you know, to move us forward? Or are you satisfied that the information that Mr. Money has put before us today gives you satisfaction and that you're going to keep a watching brief on it? Where are you on the cycle?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and I appreciate the report that has been put together by Paul and his team, actually, to respond to Councillor Robinson's request for information around this. So I think it does set us up for to look at this issue further as we go along. But I'm quite satisfied, actually, with the report that's been given, that we're quite capable of taking this on and keeping an eye on how it goes. I'm more than happy to bring an update back to Scrutiny in a timely manner when you think that you need to do that. But I have to say, as a few others have mentioned as well, I think there is a wider issue of drugs and alcohol maybe that we need to address with public health. So I'd like to take it away and do some work on that through my portfolio and my colleagues' portfolio to have a look at that before Scrutiny brings it back again. Because as has been mentioned, apart from the community safety angle, it is more about the public health side of things, really, that need to address this. And of course, that's another Scrutiny board as well. So I do think that you've had lots of information in this report that you can, satisfy yourselves that it's being dealt with appropriately, and that we'll bring it back at another time, maybe along with other issues to do with the wider drug and alcohol issue that we have.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm suggesting is that we probably get an update report, I don't know, in say 6 to 12 months, we'll agree on a figure in a minute, and also pass the report through to the chair of the Health Scrutiny Board so that she is aware of the public health impacts, and she can then decide whether or not she wants to do a further inquiry or whether she wants to work with Councillor Cooper to try and move these particular issue forward. Now, has anybody got a counter proposal or wanting to amend what I've said or wanting to give a firm 6 or 12 months feedback? Anybody wanting to be precise, or if we go for Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Chair. I think 12 months, and then we get a comparison on figures.
Yep.
Because this report gave us some very good statistics, and I think if we get a comparison on figures, we can actually see, you know, is the problem staying about the same? Is the problem rising? Is the problem slackening off? And I think that would give us a good indication, if that's okay.
Right. Mr. Money, would a 12 months, coming back in 12 months, be acceptable to yourself?
Yeah, it would. I think that's a very reasonable sort of suggestion. So I'm more than happy with that. Thank you.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll put it on the successor board's work schedule, and we will pass it on to the Public Health Scrutiny Board. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. I think 12 months is a fair proposal, because being in lockdown as well at the moment, this has the possibility of skewing figures, and we, you know, are we comparing apples and oranges through this? In essence, raising this issue alone has done some of the job that I set out to do, which is raising the profile that there is a problem, or there is an issue, whether you feel that the issue is littering or you feel that the issue is the purchase of this and how it's used. And the figures have dropped since I raised it, so I can perhaps suggest that the job's been done already and claim some success for that. But I think it's the agencies involved. On the point around deaths, I do accept what Councillor Brooks and Councillor Bentley are saying. There have been deaths when nitrous oxide is on the death certificate, unfortunately. The Royal College of Nurses have raised concerns about this. So I think taking it down a joint working route with health makes sense. But the only part that I would add is the support for parents that was mentioned earlier, and how they can identify this and what can be done. And I know Paul sought to address that, but putting a specific line in there would be useful to see what's happened in the 12 months since this report.
Right, so unless anybody has got any other points they wish to make, then the recommendation is that we will, with the amendments that have been suggested, we'll go for 12 months and we'll pass it to the Public Health Scrutiny Board. So in that case, can I thank Paul and his team, and can I thank Councillor Robinson for bringing it to our attention in the first place. Thank you all very much. Thank you. If I can now move on to item 8, which is the budget consultation. So if the following people can introduce themselves, in some cases again, but anyway, Councillor Cooper, do you want to introduce yourself again?
Yes, morning again to everybody. Councillor Deborah Cooper, Executive Board Member for Communities.
Mr. Rogers.
Morning, James Rogers, Director of Community Environment.
Mr. Evans.
Hello, it's Neil Evans, Director of Resources and Housing.
Mr. Mulvaney. Kevin.
Hello, sorry, Councillor Anderson. Hi, Kevin Mulvaney, Head of Finance, Resources and Housing.
Mr. Everett.
Good morning, Michael Everett, Head of Finance, Communities and Environment.
And is Coral Main in or not? I just don't see her name coming up on my screen in front of me. So anyway, we've obviously got apologies from Coral Main at the moment. Right. So who's leading? Who's going to give us the outline of the budget proposals? Is it Kevin or is it Michael? Or is it just over to Mr. Evans? Or who did you agree was going to lead on this particular item?
We haven't had a pre-meet, so, but I'm happy to say a few things about my bit, if you like, to begin with, Councillor Anderson.
Yeah.
And maybe James can do his. So Just to explain, I mean, we're facing a gap as a council of around about 119 million next year in the general fund. That's been reported to Executive Board. And we have, as a sort of first step, tried to identify some savings in the general fund, which have been approved now by Executive Board in September, and that amounted to, I believe, around about 32 million, of which around about 11 was within the resources and housing department. But nearly all of those savings are actually part of the resources side of things, because that's what's covered by the general fund in resources and housing. I suppose what I would say is there's a big gap between 32 million and 119. So this isn't the end of the story. So these, if you like, are have been the more immediate things which we could get on with and get agreed. But we will have to clearly revisit all our services to look at what else needs to be done to bridge that gap. In terms of a strategy, and I think again we've laid this out for Executive Board, we would be looking probably to use something in the order of around about 40 million of kind of one-off measures to actually reduce it to a level at which is possible to achieve in 1 year without causing huge disruption to the city. But clearly there's still a big gap between the 32 million and 80 in recurrent savings, which we would need. Just before I go say something about the housing revenue account, so in terms of the general fund, what's covered by your department is very small amounts of money, really. There's some elements of housing options, which advises on homelessness, which is covered by the general fund. Frankly, I say everything has to be looked at, but that's an area where I think the committee know that because of the work that we do around prevention, we have extraordinarily low levels of temporary accommodation compared to other cities, and anything which leads to an increase in temporary accommodation would far outweigh any savings that we achieve through staffing. And to give you an example, an area like Birmingham has spent as much as £10 million on temporary accommodation. So if anything like that goes out of control, it's enormously damaging. And the other area is the private housing side, which again is pretty heavily covered by grant and by licensing fees. So there's a relatively small amount of money, around about 300,000 in total, which covers all the kind of sort of statutory sort of stuff. But so everything will be on the table, but it's just giving you the indication that there isn't actually, the sums of money are quite small, and they are quite delicate areas. So the other bit then, which is in the presentation, is the housing revenue account itself, and I think I explained to a number of members in a working group meeting that the housing revenue, for those who are uninitiated, the housing revenue account is completely separate from the general fund. It's around about a £260 million fund. It's paid for by the rents of tenants, and it has to actually be for the benefit of tenants. So we can't use the housing revenue account to subsidise the general fund, and neither can the general fund be used to subsidise the housing revenue account. And because the housing revenue account is paid for by the rents of tenants, and so long as we actually collect their rent and we keep our numbers of properties up, then actually it's a more stable account than the general fund. And whilst we've got some pressures in there, we're not under the same sort of pressure that we are in the general fund by any means. So we're looking next year at pressures of around, so to give you a contrast, our net budget for the city is 550 sort of million kind of territory, and we're trying to find 120 million. This is a 260 million pounds account, and we're trying to find 6 or 5.5. So it's actually a tiny amount of pressure in comparison to what the general fund is facing, and most of that is driven by pay award and inflation, and there are a few other items in there as well which give us some of that issue. The way that we will meet it in the main will be, well, there'll be two separate measures. One will be, we will follow the formula that we've been using since the cap was lifted from the George Osborne reduction in rents, which will be to increase rents by CPI plus 1%. We will also increase service charges along the same lines, and we will continue to close the gap on self-payers on the sheltered charge, which people still receive a subsidy at the moment. We've been increasing it by £2 a week to kind of close out that subsidy over a period of years. And then we will also then be reducing some of our staffing budgets, which I think are reflective of the fact that we are looking after less properties at the moment. We're also taking some lessons, I think, from the way we've been operating over this last number of months, so how we've been able to support some things remotely, and we will continue with some of that in the future because some of it's been effective. And we've been also looking at other options, other opportunities to kind of maximise on some of the things which we've been benefiting from over the last 6 months in terms of expense, like things like staff transport and so forth. So a whole series of measures there on staffing and expenditure, which amounts to around about 3 million. The point of trying to do that is frankly the easy way for the HRA to always balance, is to just simply reduce the amount of money that we spend on improving our properties. And I think it's the priority for Councillor Cooper and ourselves as a department to actually ensure that we maximise the amount of money that we are spending on improving our property. So we will retain an £80 million programme of improvement. We're going to retain our ambitions around building new homes, and we are maintaining our annual repairs budget as well. So that's kind of the kind of package of proposals for housing, and if they're a little bit difficult, then they pale in comparison, I say, into what we faced within the general fund. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Anybody get any questions for Mr. Evans or his finance expert he's brought with him in respect of the HRA? Anybody get any questions? I don't see anyone indicating. Councillor Gruen.
Morning, Neil.
Morning.
I want to just say that I strongly agree with your comments and Councillor Cooper's about maximising the spend on the HRA on maintaining our properties and building new properties, as you've indicated. In my day, we used to have something called decency. We've always been keen as an administration on that, and I welcome the fact that you're continuing to keep up those standards and in fact improve those standards. So well done. I also wanted to say from the report, reading about the rent collection section in particular, I can see how very dedicated and hard housing staff are working to try and bring in that kind of income. And again, I think they are to be congratulated. My question is, when you're talking of the situation financially overall, in our discussion or in your discussions with senior civil servants, has there not been any leeway in terms of our need to annually make the budget balance? Have they not agreed to any flexibilities around that at all? Thank you.
So this is in relation, Councillor, to the general fund in particular you're referring to?
Yes. My last question is on the general fund, but I wanted to say those few things about the HRA.
Yeah. So on the general fund position, we are in specific discussions at this moment in time around the gap that we face within 2021. So members again will have seen, perhaps in the executive board report, that we've been indicating a gap of 50 million over and beyond the receipt of grant that we've received from government to date. And that's a mix of shortfall in income. It's also a number of land sale deals which we've not been able to actually conclude within the year because of the situation. And there's also the issues around an inability to capitalise some staff because a number of physical projects haven't gone through. So it's around about 50 million. What we're seeking to do is get an agreement with government which would allow us to capitalise that 50 million and borrow long with interest rates as they currently stand, so that we can actually manage that period, manage that sum over a much longer period of time. And to some extent, all we're doing really is asking government to do what government is doing itself, which is borrowing to get through an unprecedented period. So that discussion is taking place right now. There are other discussions which will be taking place with them over next year's settlement, and there's obviously a lobby right across local government about that settlement, and we're having it partly separately, but we're also doing it through LGA, core cities, and so forth, as you'd expect. And there are some particular things to look at, like what happens to business rate support, for example, if the amount of takings through business rates goes down as we would anticipate next year.
Okay. I don't see any other indications of anything. So, Neil, thank you very much. Mr. Rogers, do you want to do a similar type recap, please?
Yeah, I can do, Chair, by all means. So the pages to sort of concentrate on in terms of the Community and Environment budget proposals are page 16 and 17 of your agenda. You'll see there two tables over those 2 pages, which total £2.8 million worth of savings proposals for 21-22. I'm not going to go through them individually, so I'll just give you a bit of a flavour of the nature of the proposals that are on those 2 sheets. So you've got a number of proposals which relate to managerial and supervisory restructures. So the first one, for example, environmental service managerial and supervisory restructure, 635,000 is one example there, but you've got 2 or 3 other examples as you look through that list. There are a number of increases in terms of charges that we make for various things, whether it be bereavement, charges to developers for bins, whether it be charges to commercial waste traders, car parking income. So they're all included there as additional income that we expect to generate. Some savings on contracts, such as the grounds maintenance contract, where we're going to do more relaxed mowing in areas and reduce that contract by 10%. There are some savings in there which relate to things like channel shift savings in the contact centre, which Scrutiny board members will be familiar with the previous work that you've done. So the 70,000 worth of additional savings there to take it in total to 420,000 with what we've got in the midterm financial plan already. And then there are other things on that list which are expected grant funding that we expect, such as New Burdens grant funding, or funding that we're going to get from Migration Yorkshire to cover their support costs. Happy to answer any questions on the specifics, but that gives you a bit of a flavour of the sorts of proposals being taken forward.
Right, James, I don't know whether or not you can say at this stage, and Neil might want to come in as well, but the ELI initiative had a closing date that just passed. Have you had sufficient requests to meet the targets that you've got in your budget savings?
In regard to the list that you've got on your agenda today, yeah, I'm pretty confident that the people who've expressed an interest in leaving on ELI will help deliver those structural savings that are on those 2 pages.
And Mr. Evans, exactly the same with yourself within the housing revenue account. I'm not talking about throughout the whole of the council, just in terms of the HRA.
Yes, in the housing revenue account, definitely, yes.
That's fine. That's fine. Anybody get any questions themselves that they would like to raise? I don't see any indications. If anybody is one, Councillor Blackburn, you've unmuted, so I would suggest.
But I don't know if it was working properly. Yes, my concern is with the call centre savings there, and I know it's said to do with shifts, but I know that my residents have many times stated, even recently, about them having problems of getting through, and when sometimes they just get a message on saying leave a message, and when they do leave a message, nobody gets back to them. So if you're talking about reducing staff in there, then that's not going to be a good situation for our residents to be in, because obviously they're very busy now because housing offices in the main or contact centres are still closed, and so there will be, and residents are encouraged to either contact via email or phone. But as I said, so the phones will be going crackers. So I'm concerned if you reduce that, then it's going to affect our residents getting in touch with housing, etc.
Mr. Rogers?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Blackburn's right to the extent that we've been very busy over recent months, and you wouldn't expect otherwise, I don't think, in terms of the COVID-19 pressures that we've been having to deal with. But we're managing volume as well at the present time, and no particular problems. I think what we've got to do is look at this proposal in terms of what we're looking to do in the future. And one of the things that we want to do is to get fewer people ringing us, because they're able to access the information or get the service that they want digitally through the website or through other digital means that we can put into place. And this is what these savings are about. So we will reduce staffing as call numbers reduce, because those other mechanisms that are put into place enable us to do that. So I think we're pretty confident this still is the right saving to take forward.
Can I just come back in there, Chair, please, and just say, yes, whilst it's all very well putting more information on the website, as I know the refuse service have tried to do over time, the fact is that many residents don't have access to computers to get this information. And now, as I've said, contact centres in the main still closed, and some of us don't have contact centres in our wards anyway. But the fact is, then it, particularly with the older people, they ring up, you know, and I'm sure certainly all of us have residents that's elderly. I have quite a number. And they ring, and then they just get frustrated that they can't get through and that nobody gets back to them, so they ring the councillors. And obviously, yes, we sort it out. But as far as I'm concerned, you might say we should be getting more people in the call centre, not less. And our residents will suffer by this. So yes, I do have a huge concern over that.
Just to come back very quickly on that point, Councillor Blackburn. Yeah, we acknowledge that there will be some people who haven't got access to computers or smartphones and therefore may struggle with doing things digitally. And therefore, there will always be an opportunity for those people to ring us. The issue here is that the overwhelming majority of people do have the ability to do many things for themselves, and it's actually increasing the number of options that we've got available for people to do that. That will then allow us to spend more time supporting those people who can't use those particular channels. So I think this sort of initiative works in everybody's benefit looking forward.
Have we lost the chair?
It looks that way, doesn't it?
It does.
Everything seems to have gone quiet.
It does. Oh, it's connecting. I can see he's trying to connect again.
Is Pauline there, Vice Chair?
Right, okay.
Are you back?
I am back. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, we'll soon find out. But I am back. I don't know what happened there. So, did we progress anything in my absence? I was listening to. Dear me, where were we? I was getting some information back again. Did we get to the end of the James's presentation?
Yeah, I just answered a couple of questions.
You answer the questions, right? Fine, okay. Anybody get anything else they would like to raise? Obviously, there is a meeting going to be coming up in November as a result of the Executive Board of October and November bringing forward further proposals, which we will then have the chance to scrutinise. So if no one has got any other questions or queries, Councillor Smith, you've undeleted.
Yeah.
Unmuted, I should say. Yeah.
Yeah, I did raise my hand, Chair, sorry.
It must have disappeared. Right, on you go. Yeah.
Okay, so it was just a query about the additional income from the commercial trade waste services and how it was envisioned that this may or may not impact on further fly tipping, which would then put more strain on the environmental services team. Obviously, since the introduction of charges, we have seen an increase in fly tipping. And if we raise charges further or broaden them, will this lead to an increase and will that impact a different budget?
Thank you, Councillor Smith. This issue, I think, was raised when we had the working group discussion, and just to reassure members that, I mean, we only deal with a small proportion of commercial waste because there are a lot of other waste disposal companies who deal with commercial waste. So what we're doing here is just putting our prices up, and we're confident that they remain competitive. And if people, if they weren't competitive, people would go to other providers, which would be a negative impact upon our budget. And as a consequence of that sort of broader picture, we don't anticipate that this would have any major impact in terms of fly tipping.
Okay, right. I don't see any other indications. Anybody wanting to speak up if they've got anything else to say? If not, can I thank officers for making themselves available, and we look forward to getting the...
I'm sorry, Chair, about this. I should have stated earlier while I was speaking about the other matter. Can I just raise the subject of a reduction in the cleaner neighbourhood teams? Because that does concern me, as I'm sure it concerns all of us. The fact is the teams seem to be having sort of problems as it is, and to reduce them, I think we're going to have problems keeping our wards clean. So could somebody comment on that, please?
James?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to be clear that there are no budget proposals which will affect frontline Cleaner Neighbours team whatsoever included here. What you've got there is a £75,000 saving on general expenditure budget. So all of my service areas have been through line by line their budgets and identified where they can be reduced. So this relates to printing budgets, supply budgets, furniture budgets, things of that nature. So everything that's sort of in the back office rather than what's on the front line actually doing the street cleansing activity.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that, James.
Good. Okay. So if there is no one else, as I said, can I thank officers for making the time available? And if we can make sure that any of the future proposals, if we can get them as early as possible so that we have a chance to read through them and draw our own conclusions from them, it means that when we meet next to discuss the budget, we are better informed and we can have a good discussion on things. So thank you all very much for coming along. So I can move on to item 9 now, which is the housing activity. So if I could ask the following people to introduce themselves. Mr. Evans.
Hello again, Neil Evans, Director of Resource and Housing.
Mr. Crampton.
Good morning, Chair. Adam Crampton, Head of Property Management Housing.
Is Mandy Sawyer in? I can't see her name on the screen in front of me.
Chair, sorry for jumping in. It's Gerard Tinsdale, Head of Housing Services. Jill Wildman can't make this board today, so she's asked me and Adam to go through the report, if that's okay, Chair.
Fine, that's fine. And Mr. Gittos, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Good morning, Board. John Gittos, Chair of Tenant Scrutiny Board.
Thank you. Okay, so over to Adam and Gerard as to the setting out the salient facts that are in the report.
Okay, thanks, Chair. I'll just run through briefly some of the key points in the report, and then myself and Adam will be happy to take any questions. So since lockdown commenced on the 23rd of March, we've been working hard as a service to maintain levels, and with a particular focus around the most vulnerable residents in Leeds. And we put a number of emergency services in place to ensure that happened. But since lockdown measures started to ease from May this year, we've started the remobilisation of our services, and we've done that through consultation with unions, health and safety colleagues, and we've ensured that we've got risk assessments and method statements in place to allow us to remobilise around a number of the functions that are laid out in this report, which I'll just touch on. So in terms of repairs, it can be seen in the report, we've managed to complete around 48,000 this financial year. I think more positively, we're now carrying out around 2,800 repairs each week. We've been working really hard as a service to reduce our backlog, and as of today, that's just less than 11,000, and we're hoping to get to pre-COVID levels by the end of next month. It should be noted that repairs raised is currently about 30% less than pre-COVID levels, but we think once we pick things up, like annual home visits, and we start getting to people's properties more often, we suspect that there'll be an increase in that area. In terms of gas compliance, I think we're doing relatively well in this area. We're now at 99.4% in terms of gas checks, and benchmarking is against local authorities in other areas. It puts Leeds in a very strong position. There's still about 228 overdue, and we're working hard to reduce that. Normally, the level would be around 100 there, Chair. And COVID did, at one point, create a backlog of just over 800. Other compliance checks that we're carrying out, such as fire risk assessments, water hygiene inspections, asbestos inspections, we've managed to carry out around 6,000 of those since COVID was put in place, and we're more or less fully remobilised in that area now. In terms of the investment programme, we now fully remobilised with a capital investment programme, and we've got about 20 active projects delivering improvements to residents' homes, such as district heating, CCTV, ground source heat pumps, rewiring, and so on. In terms of voids and lettings, we suspended choice-based lettings during the pandemic, and we introduced an emergency allocations policy, and that was to ensure that our most vulnerable customers could still access housing. And up until the end of August, we'd helped around 150 applicants in that way. We've now reintroduced choice-based lettings. That is still running alongside our emergency panel, and work's going well in this area now. We've managed to get our void levels back down to about 721 as of this week, which is about 1.3% of our stock. But just to remind the board that in July, at the peak of the pandemic, we had over 900 properties empty. So there's been some significant progress, and we're hoping to get back to pre-COVID levels by the end of the calendar year, if not sooner. In terms of rent collection, the collection of arrears during lockdown has been a challenge, particularly given the restrictions on applying for evictions and the serving of notices. And this caused arrears to increase by around about 590,000. However, by supporting tenants with applications for benefits and universal credit, we've managed to continue to reduce this figure. Arrears work around the serving of notices is recommencing. We've got about 236 residents that we're going to be looking to serve notices on. Just to be clear to everybody, we're not looking at asking for any possession through the courts. We're not looking at doing any eviction work at this moment in time. And the notices that we're looking to serve is only on people that have got 6 months or more rent arrears, and that's following current government legislation around this. But I think a positive note in terms of the collection figures, we're actually round about 0.5% higher than we were last year, 96.5%. And just picking up on some of the comments mentioned earlier around the HRA, that would, if we maintain those levels through the end of the year, would generate an additional £1 million worth of income to the HRA based on where we were at the same period last year. In terms of tenancy management and support, staff have continued to stay in contact through lockdown. Stay in contact with tenants, through lockdown, and that's mainly been through telephone contact, text, and emails. And our focus was to ensure we made contact with the most vulnerable tenants. And we were successful in contacting around about 12,500 tenants, age over 60 with a known vulnerability. And we've also managed to contact around 4,000 tenants who were shielding to carry out wellbeing checks. In terms of the private rented sector, to support the sector during lockdown, the council suspended requests for fees of all licence types, both mandatory and selective licensing. Now, ever since the start of August, the council has started to request payments of all fees. The main request has been for around 2,800 outstanding selective licences fees to be paid. This will allow the scheme to continue, and we've now got about 80% of those paid. In terms of homelessness, the COVID lockdown meant we quickly had to reconsider our approach to providing emergency accommodation. This resulted in the service acquiring at a peak of around about 230 hotel rooms for use. However, there's been a lot of great work in that area across the whole service, and we've managed to reduce the numbers in hotels now from the peak of around about 230, 240. For today, we've just got 53 left in the hotels. And the intention is to get our TA numbers down to pre-COVID levels by the end of the calendar year. In terms of managing increased demand for the service, that's remained strong. And we've still maintained a prevention rate for people that contact us at risk of homelessness of around about 90%. And just to put that in a national perspective, nationally, it's around about 50%. So Leeds is maintaining a real strong position in that area. And we've been successful, Chair, in submitting a number of bids to government to try and increase our funding to help, particularly around rough sleeping and homelessness. And we've been awarded just over £1 million to support bringing in an additional 20 one-bedroom properties, and works underway to acquire those properties, and that will further reduce the numbers in temporary accommodation. In terms of the outbreak planning, we're continuing to support the corporate approach in terms of the outbreak planning, signposting tenants as needed for testing, ensuring relevant information is shared. And we've actually got a small team in place now, and we use that more recently in Hare Hills to support that local outbreak. I think to summarise, COVID has required housing leads to think differently about how we manage our services, moving from an office-based environment to working from home. And to support this new way of working, we're looking at a number of different options, such as better software for customer engagement, remote video tools to carry out virtual inspections so that we can deal with repairs much quicker, and looking at contact over the phone and over email rather than actually having staff going out and knock on people's doors. Although there is still an element of where we need to go to people's properties. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we've got processes in place to allow us to do that. And then I just think linking up on the last agenda item in terms of the financial pressures on the general fund, when we had the peak in the increase in temporary accommodation, that was predicting a pressure for us around 2.43 million. Given the work that I've just alluded to, we reduced that pressure down to about 640,000 this year, and that work continues. That's just a brief update on the report, Chair, and Adam and myself will be happy to take any questions.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Right, I've got Councillor Collins first, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just listening to you say that you're going to try and get the rent arrears sorted out, and talking to the tenants about monies they owe, how much of a problem have we generated by delaying sending some of our tenants invoices for food that they've received through the voucher scheme? I was concerned a month or so ago that we still hadn't sent invoices out to tenants, and I would assume that a lot of our tenants have taken advantage of that scheme because they are vulnerable people. Have we actually looked at that side of it? Because I'm just mindful that if we're putting them under pressure for rent, but they also owe us money for other things, it could be a little bit too much for some people. Have we looked at that, please?
It's certainly something that we would speak to our customers about. When we're talking to people that owe us money, we will obviously look at any other debts that are there. Obviously, housing is a priority debt, councillor, but we would work with them to create some type of affordable payment method to ensure that they can cover all debts and still remain in the home.
But at the moment, we don't know that, what the impact or how many people might be suffering from that.
I don't have an answer to that part of the question, councillor, no.
Councillor Cooper would like to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just for a point of clarity, really, for Councillor Collins, the volunteer hubs and the food distribution was from the Communities Directorate and not from directly from housing. So it's a separate directorate's budget that we're talking about. So it's not on Gerard's activity report. It's a different entity, but nonetheless, still an issue if some of our tenants have had bills for other things, including other bills from us as a council and an authority, as well as reminder about rent arrears also that they have. But as Gerard reassured you earlier, there will be no action taken against possession of property at this point in time. Actually, what we need to do is to collect the arrears that are due to us in a timely manner, and I think reminders can maybe help us to do that. A lot of people are back at work now and able to pay their rent. So if we need to remind people, then that's what we need to do at this point in time.
Okay. Councillor Collins, do you want to come back again?
No, I'm happy, Chair. Thank you.
And thank you. Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Chair. And can I also welcome the excellent report from Gerald. Well done, Gerald. And also, I just want to say thank you to everybody involved in district heating. As you know, in Bermondsey, Richmond Hill, we've got the most multi-storey blocks, and that's where over 2,000 properties are going to be benefiting from district heating. And people are already seeing the reduction in bills and the fuel poverty, and people are willing to spend that money saving onto food and other things. So that's welcome. Thank you. My question is regarding the voids. What's the time scale for a void property for ready to let, Gerald, please?
Obviously, council, we want to turn our properties around as quick as possible so that we can get people off our housing register rehoused in them. We would aim to let our properties within 28 days, but obviously we would like to do that much sooner if we can, councillor, but our target is 28 days.
Thank you. And what's the numbers on our waiting list for rehousing, Gerald, please, in Leeds City Council?
We've just done a refresh of our waiting list, councillor, since we brought Arbitras in, and we've got I think it's around about 26,000 on our waiting list at this moment in time. Of that 26,000, approximately 25% of those are considered to be in urgent housing need.
Okay. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like it noting that I'd like to say thank you, Gerard and Councillor Cooper, and to the team at Swarcliffe Housing Office, especially Helen Mallinson, because I've spoken to her on a daily basis several times, because obviously we're all getting more phone calls, emails, and the service received has been excellent. And let's hope it can continue when we come back to normal, when they're in their office. But they really have given an excellent service, so thank you.
Thank you, councillor. I'll certainly pass that message.
Anybody get any other questions they'd like to ask before I'll invite Mr. Gittos to make any contribution he wants? Councillor Blackburn?
Yes, Chair. I seem to be having a problem here with the hand,
Okay.
Yeah, and I keep pressing it, but no, obviously you're not getting it at your end. Anyway, yes, I'd like to just agree with what Councillor Khan has been saying about his concern about the 833 voids. And yes, I think we'd all like it to be 28 days. It doesn't seem to be at the moment. And it is of concern when, as we've said, there's so many people that are waiting, and also so many people putting in for the houses that are advertised, which, you know, it isn't really many when we've got 204 to let and 833 voids. Clearly that shouts out that we need to get these voids sorted out pretty quickly. The other thing I wanted to say on the perhaps less important, one might say, is to do with walk-rounds with councillors. Now, in my ward, there's been two, just with a councillor, which, okay, yes, I understand with COVID about that. And then it seems to have stopped. And I just wondered what it was like in other people's wards, because I wondered, has it stopped full stop, or is it just maybe in my ward, or what the situation is with that, please? Thank you.
Right, before bringing Gerard in, Neil's indicated he would like to come in. So, Mr. Evans?
Yeah, just on the issue of voids. I mean, clearly we want as low as number as possible, but the situation, just to put it into context again, because I think Gerard referred to this, is we've gone up to 1.3% of our property being void. We've had remarkably low void numbers over the last few years, down as low as like 0.6%. I mean, any landlord with that level of voids would, you know, it's been pretty astonishing performance. So we're up to 1.3%. We will get that back down to under 1% in the next number of weeks. Because clearly it is important for us to get as low as possible. I don't want members to feel it's kind of out of control, because I think the fact that we have 55,000 houses, sometimes when you see the raw number like 800, it kind of looks more than it actually is as a real proportion. I think the issue around the 28 days also just needs to be thought about carefully. Clearly we want to turn things around as fast as possible. But the void process is also the opportunity for us to actually improve houses, and that is the opportunity when somebody's out of their home to do any works around things like retrofit, to do rewires, to do all the work which is actually very difficult to do when people are in situ, and therefore there is a balance to actually dealing with those things properly, actually making sure that when somebody actually moves in, they're getting a good property, averting long-term maintenance costs, and balancing that around the speed of turnover. So yeah, just that's something I think for scrutiny boards just bear in mind when they look at these figures.
Gerard, I mean, certainly to answer Councillor Blackburn, in my ward, in terms of the walkabouts, they're still ongoing, but they are limited to one councillor to go out at any one time. The housing staff themselves are frustrated at that, I know, because they would like to meet all of us, because in some wards you've got 3 councillors who are actively interested, and in most wards 2. It's very rarely do you only find one councillor interested in a ward in the council housing side, so it's frustrating the officers as well. So, but they are still continuing, and I was speaking to our housing manager the other day, and they are intent in continuing with them as well. Gerard, is there anything else you want to add in respect to the walkabouts?
It's an area of work that we were looking to carry out much more, Chair, but given the additional measures in the country and in Leeds, we've just had to hold back on that. You're right, they are taking place across a number of our estates now. We've got risk assessments in place to allow us to do that, but we have to be mindful of social distancing and the numbers that actually attend.
Yeah, thank you. Right, Councillor Smith.
Thanks, Chair. Well, firstly, I welcome this report, and having spoken separately to Adam yesterday and getting a better understanding of where he and the team are going, I welcome some changes that are coming. In terms of the numbers of void, yeah, they are high, but they are a small percentage. I would personally be happier with their current idea of making the homes the best they can be before they are let again, because I get so many complaints within the ward that they've just taken a house and there's still this to be done and that to be done, and then the resident is being constantly disturbed. So if we can continue that, but obviously as expediently as we possibly can, then obviously that is the best way forward. But I think the housing team in certainly the Pudsey office are doing an absolutely amazing job. Very difficult circumstances. They actually lost one of their team, passed away. So I personally would like to put my thanks on record to Sophie Roberts and the team. I think they've done an absolutely brilliant job. I think this report is very positive. And I think if we can all work together, we can make improvements, and that's got to be for the greater good of every home, every council-owned home in the city. Thank you.
Okay. Right, Mr. Gittos, do you want to say anything on behalf of the Scrutiny Board?
Yeah. Good morning, Chair. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Way back in March, the board decided that the service we were going to look at in 2021 was going to be tenant engagement. Since May, we've had 7 meetings. They have been challenging because half of the board are not used to this platform of Zoom. So I'd like to congratulate them for their work in what we're doing. What we've done in this, without making it brief, is to tell you there are 4 stages to our review. The first stage we have headed as wider tenant feedback and insight, how the service engages and uses the feedback, with now a big focus being on digital. This would have been part of the review anyway, but because of COVID, this has really brought it to the fore. And we thought this would be the first thing to do and to hit on the first stage, which we are now in the process of dealing with. The second stage is how the service and tenants, the design, the policy and decision-making of tenant engagement. The third stage is the housing advisory panels. We want to look at the service support, supporting wider communities. And the third will be the strategic tenant influence. We're looking at tenant engagement with a view of the white paper that the government, we believe, is going to be producing by the end of the year. And because of what happened at Grenfell, we feel that maybe the tenant engagement is going to come very much to the fore in that white paper. I will end there, but I want to at this same time say to you that I'm hoping that at the end of each stage, instead of what we normally do, make a report at the end and make recommendations to the council, then we're hoping to do this after each stage. And I hope to be given the chance, like I have done presently on previous reports, present each stage to you. I'd like to take this opportunity, first of all, to thank Mandy Sawyer and her team for giving us the tools, again, in this challenging time, to do what we're doing. I want to thank Councillor Cooper. She has been taking updates on this. We have had 2 meetings since May, and there are other meetings penciled in. And also yourself, Chair, for giving us this opportunity. You've been to our board a number of times, and thank you for listening this morning.
Thank you. Right. What I want to do now is I'm going to bring Councillor Cooper in to try and draw things together, and then I'll make a final comment. So, Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I just wanted to take this opportunity really to thank Scrutiny Board, you as Chair and Scrutiny Board members, and also wider elected members for their support for our housing teams out in your various wards, I have to say, and assistance to them in what's been an extremely challenging time since lockdown, I've got to say. And as Councillor Smith said, we have had some, some sadness within our housing teams of people who have become ill, and we've actually lost some members of staff as well. So I do think it's been an extremely challenging time for the teams, and I want to thank you for that support. But I also, Gerard's presented the report on behalf of Jill, who couldn't be with us today. And I just wanted to pass my thanks on to Neil, to Jill, and to all the team for everything that they've done during this extremely challenging time, I've got to say. I know that I've spoken to a number of them completely outside of social hours that you would expect them to be responding to issues. And I'm sure you have as members as well. And they have responded, and they've done what's been necessary for you and for the tenants as well. So please, can you, Neil and Gerard, pass to Jill my thanks for everything that you've done over this period of time. I'm extremely proud to be the executive board member with responsibility for this team. They go above and beyond every time, and thank you again for it. I think the report you've got in front of you today really shows the depth of the work that housing have done over recent times, and particularly over the difficulty we've had since the lockdown from COVID. and it shows you some fantastic examples of what we've been able to achieve, working together, not only with our elected members, but also geographically through our local partners, and also with the government actually, giving us grant funding that's been allowed us to do some of the intense work we've needed to do with rough sleepers and homelessness over that time as well. So hopefully you've had a chance to read it all, but it's some great examples of everything that's been done in that time, and we all should take pride in all of that work that's been done on our behalves as elected members in the city. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Graham, are you wanting to come in? You unmuted yourself, so I presumed that meant you wanted to come in. No. That's okay. Right. In that case, then, can I draw this to a conclusion? Can I, first of all, pass on my own personal thanks at the Chair's brief. The Chair's brief, as far as this report, was actually very short because it was so well written and it contained everything that I wanted. There was no need to challenge or to debate about trying to get this in or that in. The cooperation and the way that the management team have worked under Neil and Jill's guidance is a credit to them and to officers in general, in terms of this is the way that we should be doing it, and in terms of making themselves available. If you need to know anything about the council housing position and housing in general, this is a Bible that you can actually use. You can use this report in order to get access to the information so that you can update your residents in terms of what you're doing. And if there are anybody who's listening in wants to and are a tenant or knows of a tenant, then this report is worthwhile getting a copy of. So thank you all for your attendance, and thank you to Mr. Gittis for the comments he's made, and we are always only too pleased to give any help and support that we can. So with that said, thank you. We now move on to item 10, the work schedule. You've seen the report. Our next formal meeting is on the 12th of November. And you can see the items that we're going to be covering at that. And we've got a working group meeting on the 16th of November to look into the budget proposals that are coming forward in the October and November exec board meetings. Becky, is there anything I have forgotten?
No. Put simply.
Good. In that case, then, I look forward. Thank you all for your attendance today. We've even managed to cope with. Becky did point out that some of us were kicked out literally of the system, and there's been a systems problem. That's why you've lost some of us at various times today. But we've managed to come through that and show that good old British spirit that we go on, and that we've always got other people to replace us if we are not there. So thank you all for your time and effort today. It's much appreciated.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Stay